11:59 at Radio Free America. This is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I've got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
All right, well, so I guess this is the end of the Daily Gun Show. It's happened before, but thanks, Woods, for being here for the end, the last show.
Well, I appreciate the invite. Sorry to see it's going to go.
Yep. All right, well, so I tried to revive it a couple of times, but it doesn't look like, a couple of us, we could just have a off-air chat, accomplish the same thing. So, yeah, I don't know. Anything you want to talk about tonight before we end it?
I saw that, how much we all love the sporting systems out of Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
You know how we have that 1639 stupid law where you have to take a class in order to buy anything semi-automatic, also known as an assault weapon, which in their definition includes 1022s and the like, and Marlin 60s and all kinds of ridiculousness?
No. Why don't you eliminate people, because that just seems like another thing that you're dealing with, but specifically, what are you talking about? Okay,
so 1639, with the worst part of it, of a whole bunch of like safe storage laws and all these other sillinesses, they've taken the word assault weapon and made it anything that uses the gas to move the action through. So technically, like 1022s, Marlin 60, really anything semi-automatic is, according to Washington state law, now going to be an assault rifle or assault weapon, is what they actually call it in the law. And if you want to buy one of those, you can still buy it. It's not a ban, but you have to go take a class, which is 4 hours, and and then you have to have that in your hand in order to buy the new, or you have to buy your assault rifle. And
is that me, or did he cut out?
He cut out. That's also they raised the age to 21.
Problems with that you only have to go through the federal background check. You have to see patrol.
Stop. You cut out at some point, so
okay.
Go back a couple of sentences and start again.
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, it started again, so thanks.
Okay. Well, basically, the just in the end of it, in July 1st, that's when our 1639 starts, and you have to have taken that 4-hour class in order to buy anything they determine as assault rifle or assault weapon. And then also, you're not only going to have to go through the regular federal background check, you're going to have to go through the state one. And the state of Washington, the state patrol, has said that it might take them up to 30 days to get back to you on your check. Well, the 4473 only is good for 30 days. So nobody really knows what's going to happen July 1st. But the reason I brought up sporting systems is everybody's been like, there's been a bunch of these classes have been popping up for, reasonable people, $50, $100. Sporting systems figure out a way to do it all online for free.
To comply with the requirements through that, instead of capitalizing on or exploiting the situation and trying to make money on it.
Right. That's what I was applauding them for, is they could easily get a bunch of people to sign up for $50, and they're like, no, it's Second Amendment's more important. So let's go ahead and make it free. So therefore kind of avoiding the thing. So I was just like, good on those guys. And those guys are amazing. I'm like, we've said before, Sporting Systems out of Vancouver is one of the best ones that has been fighting 1639 from the get-go. And all kind of great memes, and like their presence is out there. They've been doing a really good job. I think you've mentioned it before.
Yeah, we're going to be doing a show. Yankee's going to do his show a couple hours early on Thursday, and from that Sporting Systems gun shop.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, they just moved locations too, so that's a brand new gun shop too.
I don't like the fact that they just changed the age limit too to 21 on all those items. So, I mean, gosh, that was probably one of like that was such a happy moment on my 18th birthday, going into the gun store and buying my first, like my real first gun that I'm actually buying, right? And now you got to wait till you're 21, but yet you can serve your country and do so many other things, but you can't even own a 22 Ruger 1022.
Yeah,
Until you're 21.
yeah. Good luck, single mom that wants to defend herself with some kind of 20 gauge shotgun or 1022 or something. Good luck with that.
Now there is a lawsuit on trying to get that taken down, right? And then I've heard there are some sheriffs there that say that they will not enforce this.
That's true, and I think there's 39 counties in Washington, and I think like 19 of them are going to not enforce it. And then the Attorney General Bob Ferguson has said that like he'll bring them on charges and stuff, and they're like, good luck with that. That's the one that I've said before that come election time, that's the one I'm going to try to get people to vote Bob Ferguson out, because the governor signs things, but it's the attorney generals a lot of times that write these things. So if we can get them out, maybe other attorney generals will go, I don't want to get kicked out because I'm not going to write gun legislation because I don't want to get kicked out. But like every state, like every West Coast state, it's really run by one or two counties, and then the other 37 counties basically get the shaft kind of. But there is that lawsuit with Second Amendment Foundation out of Bellevue.
And that's the Second Amendment Foundation that's pushing that?
Yeah, they're out of Bellevue, Washington. Those are some good dudes over there.
So Midnight is saying, devil's advocate, I don't know why he says that, but then he says, if it's free, then people don't mind doing the class online. Will that make it be okay with them and they will not fight it? People would fight more if they're pissed about paying.
I think there's some legitimacy in that idea. But the others, it's a double-edged sword. But the other side of that is also, if you make it free and easy, then you've kind of negated the need for the law. And until we can get it overturned, it's a way that we can comply, but not have to, pay through the nose. But I get what he's saying. What do you guys think?
I think it might have been something they added to smooth it over to get it passed. So, whether it was a negotiated in there or whether they felt it was something like, hey, we got to, make it seem like it's not as bad as it is, and we'll take this right later and we'll change it to this 40-hour course and charge $1,000 for it later on. Like, we can worry about that a couple years down the road, but for right now, let's just, like, we're okay with making it free and easy.
Well, I don't think that their intent was to make it free and easy. That was the sporting systems that just kind of responded to the need and said, hey, this isn't right. But I see what you're saying is that maybe the anti-gunners put in any kind of regulation or law or whatever to just get Washington State used to it, and then they can change it over time. I think there's super legitimacy in that idea.
And to boil the frog without it jumping out of the pot, you incrementally raise the heat. So by creating these things and getting them used to more infringements.
Well, remember, this is the same law that when they were, you see the people in front of the grocery stores, they were literally caught lying about what the bill was to the people when they would sign it. They say it was like for saving the oceans or something. And the Washington State Supreme Court said that's okay. People need to read what they sign. So they were doing all kind of shady stuff because they brought that lawsuit first, and then they lost that. And then I believe the new one, the basis of it, there's too many things to have on an initiative. They have like 17 different things they're doing. And in general, that's not something you do with an initiative. It makes me really not like initiatives. Don't we elect people for a reason?
Did you mention the part about how that the private property part of the law? Did you go into that woods?
No, not well. If they break into my house and steal my gun, and they go rob a bank, I'm guilty of a Class C felony.
Well, not that. That's also another point we can talk about. I was talking about so there's and again, I'm not super familiar. I just know what I've read, like things I've read and heard
Yeah.
about it. But apparently, there's some part written into the 1639 bill to where, let's say, so like right now, if I took a gun into a business that didn't want me to have a gun there, they can ask me to leave and I can leave, but I don't get charged with a crime for that, right? But with the 1639 bill, from my understanding now, and I'm not sure if they have to have certain posters posted or what, like Texas, but my understanding now is that if you have a gun on someone else's property and they don't want you there, well, now you're guilty of breaking that 1639 because that's part of that bill. And, so I guess if they had a no gun sign in there and you brought a gun in there anyway, even if it was concealed and got caught with it somehow, well, now you're a criminal. Instead of this them being saying, hey, you got to leave, well, now you've actually broken a law for doing it.
Yeah, I'm not super aware of that one. My vague recollection is that you would just get cited, but then again, it's boiling the frog again.
So, like, the way I think it was worded is like you have to have it on either your own property, under like your control or something. If I remember right, that's how it was worded. Like either your own property that you own or property that's under your control or you're given permission to be on. So if you walk into someone else's property, like they were talking about that. I read a thing on Instagram about it, that how now just walking into a store might make you a criminal.
Well, the one that's super annoying is, say you take your assault weapon. I know it's a stupid term, but that's what it says in there. And you want to go to public land, you can't. You can either take it to the range or you can shoot it on your property. That's it.
Because that goes with that part of that law.
Right.
That's the same thing. It has to be either property you own or property you have permission to be on, or that's under your control.
And that's kind of a gray area because we have the forest pass where you pay like $30 and you can go into the U.S. forestry land, because we've got nothing but that in every direction there is. So that's a little gray area, because if you get the forest pass, does that give you permission to be there? So that's one of those ones we don't know until the government does whatever the government's going to do.
And was there something in there about having your guns secured? I'm not sure if it was at home or in your car, but like your guns have to be. Is it going to be like how Californians have to have a certain minimum type of safe or something in order to get a gun?
That's the problem with the bill, that the Second Amendment Foundation is, that part is vague. They just say safe storage.
Well, a lot of the whole bill, from what I read on Instagram, a lot of the whole bill is vague. So I saved a post about it on Instagram that I read, and like that's like a lot of the different parts of that bill, they leave very vague and broad, so they can interpret it in many different ways, and that's the scary part, right? And that's why people were talking about the businesses. Like a lot of people were instantly like, "Oh, it's just about land. You just can't go out and shoot on public land and stuff." But they were like, people were saying like, no, this can be used in businesses, in a restaurant, in a whatever store, and make you a criminal.
Right. So yeah, it's gonna be a tough fight, but hopefully they can get it overturned. But I mean, even in an ideal situation, that'll take several years.
Oh, at least. I mean,
yeah, at an ideal, That's why I want to get rid of the Attorney General. Go after the guy that wrote it. And then there's the other piece of it is, so one of the founders of Amazon and Paul Allen, who's passed away, they gave $5 million each for this bill to pass. The NRA raised about $500,000, and I know when it was first going, I know G is the one that pointed it out to me. It was the only gun bill in the entire nation, and I don't think there's like a conspiracy. I just think we missed an opportunity to take everybody and focus on one state and beat them back. And it was the only one in the 2000 in the last election that was even on anybody's for the whole nation all the way across. Just goes to show, like we've been talking about for weeks, that we all got to like band together in other states and care about other states. Because if it can happen here, it can happen anywhere.
Well, I think that whole gun control thing spreads kind of like a disease, almost, is the way it seems to be spreading from state to state, from neighboring state to neighboring state.
Amen.
So,
Yeah.
All right, so this is a video that I was putting together, one of the videos I put together from the 2-hour conversation with everybody the other day about the NRA and this concept of having to deal with the repercussions of a situation like this is what they talked about. And we're going to listen to a couple of minutes about as soon as I quit yapping right here.
And also, let me rebut to Tim just a little bit here. And I do this with 100% respect because we are all on the same team, like everyone on this panel. We all know each other very clearly and have for a very long time. You talk about the litigation, and see, I'd see litigation as a failure of lobbying, and then I do think that the NRA is really the only game in town when it comes to lobbying. And for the people out there, lobbying is basically threatening politicians to do what we want in the way that we want them to do it, and they have the biggest stick in the room. Bottom line, like GOA, FPC, Second Amendment Foundation, I tried to figure out all the lobbying that they were doing. I specifically talked to FPC, and he said, oh, mostly California, but we branched out to about 4 states when I talked to him in January, and maybe it's a little bit more now. But I mean, the bottom line is like litigation is after everything else has failed. It's after our advocacy and our activism has failed. It's after our lobbying has failed. And that's all we're stuck with. And I use Colorado as the greatest example of that ever. July 1st, 2013, we lost the right to any magazines over 15 rounds. But we recalled the head of the Senate. We recalled another senator that was responsible for this. We did all these things. We did so much activism. We did so much lobbying. We still failed. And the litigation has been fruitless and useless in Colorado. Maybe I was reading today that we'll see something in the future. But if we lose that lobbying, that's what I worry about. And if we lose the ability to lobby and the ability to take these corrupt politicians out to the fancy dinners and do the things that we need to do to win them over to our side, that's what I worry about. And again, I mean, like, Tim, you are not wrong by any means. Like, I understand what you're saying and your strategy, but I also think that it's risky. And I am stuck in between a little bit of the two. Rob?
So that was the point I wanted to bring up. I don't know if you guys want to watch the rest of this thing or not, but what do you think of that concept that if what you're dealing with in Washington State is because of a failure of lobbying, and now you're basically left with, the last resort. If you fail with the education and then repealing it, you live with it.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's why I want to get rid of the attorney general. We don't have to worry about the governor because he's trying to run for president, so he's not going to win anything anyway. So that's the one we can actually go after. But I think he's got a legitimate point there.
And they're still there. So that'll be that. This is the last show. So anything else before we wrap it up? Been a good run, 800 something episodes.
have you talked about has anyone mentioned the bill that's I think it's Bill 742, I want to say. I know it's in the 700s, but the one that's going through in Oregon, that's outlawing a lot of the hunting in Oregon. So, like, it's not just semi-automatic handguns or rifles that are under attack. Hunting rights, all sorts of guns. So, like, a lot of people are like, oh, they're never going to come for my shotgun or bolt-action hunting rifle. And they're coming for everything right now. We're under attack. We're under constant attack, and I don't think a lot of people are realizing that.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I'll have to look more into it. What did you say the number was?
I believe it was 742 or 743. I'll have to look it up. I know I saved a thing about it, but they're outlawing various different types of hunting and restricting various types of hunting. And so it's not just a lot of the hunters out there. Like, I hear a lot of, things like, oh, like, they're not going to come after my bolt action or shotgun they're taking a little tiny piece of the pie at a time, as much as they can, whatever they feel they can take. And, like, there really is an end goal, I think, of they want gun control, which means no guns. Gun control doesn't mean, oh, we want to control what guns you want, this and that. I think the end goal of gun control is to get rid of all the guns. And then where are they going to go from there? I don't know, but I think that we're constantly under attack, and I see more and more pro-gun states like Oregon I bet if you would have asked anyone in Oregon or Washington just 5, 10 years ago and talked about like, oh, what if a bill came through like this? I bet you almost the majority would say that's never going to happen here. And you living there would, like, if we would have talked about, if I would have brought up something like 1639 5 or 10 years ago, would you ever thought something would have came through like Washington like that?
5, yes. 10, definitely not. Yeah, 10 years ago, I wouldn't even thought of it.
Because
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, just several years ago, I went up to Oregon and to the Oregon Trail, and I was told about like just what a pro-gun and awesome state it is, and stuff, and now I'm seeing, a bunch of anti-gun laws getting pushed through, anti-hunting laws. Just, I see these restrictions coming, and, I had family that moved to Oregon because it was just such a free, awesome state, and they have since moved back. So, I mean, that's the real thing. I mean, it's coming to every state.
And both Portland, Oregon and Seattle, Washington have, like, in the last 10 years, gotten about a third bigger. So literally just those, Portland, Oregon decides everything for the entire state of Oregon, and Seattle decides everything for the whole state of Washington, because with population, they've got way more people in just that one county than the entire state. We're not the only people. That happens all the time in lots of states. But, with everybody moving to the cities even more than they already had, that was the big difference. And it just got
It was Senate Bill 723, so I found the actual number, so I was wrong. It's Senate Bill 723 out of Oregon. But I mean, they're coming, and it's a constant battle. If we can't let our guard down just because we get what we think is a pro-gun president or a pro-gun politician in our state, I don't think that necessarily ensures our rights, and we have to stay vigilant and proactive if we want to keep these rights. It's a shame that we have to fight so hard to keep them, but what's the alternative? Losing them? Just giving them up?
It's not a shame. I don't agree with that. I mean, the lack of fight is socialism or fascism, right? Where you have no opportunity or no interest in fighting. So freedom dictates that we'll have debate. Right? If everybody has their own opinion, there's always going to be a difference of opinion.
I can see that. I can see that.
So I guess I'm just looking at it as a mindset. If you look at it like, then it always seems like a burden. I mean, so I think that's one of the challenges, to get past that mindset and just deal with it for what it is. So that made me think about the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. Anybody ever heard of that quote before?
Yes.
So over here, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance is the way that I've heard it. So I looked it up on the internet and found a couple of things. First off, vigilant means to be alertly watchful, especially to danger. Over here, and someone who is vigilant gives careful attention to a particular problem or situation and concentrates on noticing any danger or trouble that there might be. So that's what vigilance is. Then I went to some place, because it says over here about who gets the credit. Oh, what did I do? I closed it. Who gets the credit for the quote, and this is a pretty interesting little site here. So it talks about how Jefferson is often quoted, or the one quoted, and it's not actually his. No one has proven that he's ever said it. That happens all the time. But they said that it did happen. Well, first it happened in 1852, but then later it happened here. I guess it happened in 1852 here, where Wendell Phillips was an American abolitionist, and talking to a member of a Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society, and I guess the speech, included, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. Power is ever stealing from the many to the few. The manna of popular liberty must be gathered each day, or it is rotten. The living sap of today grows the dead rind of yesterday." Or, excuse me, the living sap of today outgrows the dead rind of yesterday. The hand entrusted with power becomes, either from human depravity or esprit de corps, the necessary enemy of the people. Only by continued oversight can the Democrat in office be prevented from hardening into a despot. Only by undetermined agitation can the people be sufficiently awake to the principle not to let liberty be smothered in material prosperity. And that's as true as it was in 1852, no?
Yeah, and well, some of our younger generation, when I read old quotes like that, and I've had to learn from a long time, so I know some of these things, but like the word like manna, a lot of people might not know what that means. I understand it to either mean one of two things, either like magic or like life and power, right?
It was the food that came down from the heavens that fed Moses. It's from the Bible originally.
Yeah, sustenance, food. I ain't gonna be able to put it in here, so I'll just put the link. But yeah, I think it rings true today, like it did back then. That you're aware that it's it's like he's trying. I read from this that there's just certain things that are going to be this way when you have freedom, and part of it is to be awake to that and be aware of it. Otherwise, you get smothered in material. If you just don't pay attention to it, you're letting other people walk all over you.
Another similar quote that comes to mind is nothing worth fighting for ever comes easy, right?
Otherwise, you wouldn't be fighting for it. It'd be given to you. And always suspect what's given to you, right? Or maybe not, but whatever. I guess that's the end of the show. So we had some people watching, only a third of them, maybe a little over a third thumbed it. So I don't even know if those people are humans or if they're robots watching. Got a couple of people on gun channels that are green over there. Thanks for watching over there. This might have been the last show. So anything else before we head out?
Early watch tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern. Talk 2A news and guns.
Yeah, it's been a great show, Dead Horse. I appreciate that. Even though I'm usually at school and I have to watch on, the stupid tube, but because they block everything else. But it's been a lot of fun to have something in the morning when I'm getting the classroom ready.
Yeah, appreciate that. It has been good. Had a lot of good discussions over there. I've brought in a lot of new people and brought a lot of old people back, and keeping Early Watch alive. And I really liked what Early Watch stands for and what Early Watch is trying to do. And I hope to keep that alive and help to bring some more people into that and help Early Watch grow. I really like the focus on Early Watch. So we have Early Watch, and I believe I counted 17 states. So there's still a lot of states out there. If you don't have an Early Watch in your state, or maybe even if you do, it's a collaborative effort. Come over here and talk to us about it. Let's get you signed up with an Early Watch account, and you can start sharing your local 2A news with us, and we can start putting that out there to the masses. Did anyone mention John Wayne today?
Nope, he died today.
Yeah, June 11th in 1979. Shortly after I was born, lost John Wayne to stomach cancer. You guys have a favorite John Wayne quote? Favorite John Wayne movie?
I know not everybody agrees, but I think his best work is True Grit. Because I also read the book and he nailed it.
I've always been a big fan of the Cowboys myself. I grew up with that movie. It's just hits home, and I really like that movie. And probably one of my favorite quotes from him is from John Wayne is talk low, talk slow, and don't talk too much. What about you, G? What's your favorite John Wayne flick?
So he's been in 168, but I had a list of 170 something things because I also had appearances in there, and like he was on I Love Lucy and stuff like that. So I found a list that had 174 something things in it, and I set up a site one of my websites one time, and just basically did like a blog and started watching them. So you can watch a whole bunch of them on Amazon, especially the old stuff, the black and white stuff. You can watch quite a bit of them on Netflix, and they're different. At least when I was watching them, there were different sets of old John Wayne stuff. So you can get a bunch of them that way. And then when you get to any of the good stuff or the new stuff, it costs money on, I don't remember Netflix. Does Netflix charge you money if it's a good movie? Or is that just Amazon?
I think that's just Amazon.
I think Netflix lets you watch anything. So Netflix just had a lack of them, but Amazon had some that I just didn't feel like paying $3 to watch a movie. It just seems wrong nowadays, right? So I did find, like over the years, like I'd find a CD here, or I mean a DVD here or there, or I'd have find one on YouTube or someplace free that I could watch them. So I had the list, and then I was updating the list as I saw them. So I was intentionally trying to watch them all, and I had lost this list over the years somewhere, but I was down to where I had seen pretty much most of them, except for a couple of the World War II ones that for some reason were really hard to find. And I can't say there's a John Wayne movie. There's just too many of them, and I guess what I'm a long way of saying is I've seen a lot of them now, and there's quite a bit of them. They're kind of the same, but I've got there's so many of them, and he has so many different ones. Like I can't compare McHugh with like The Searchers. I mean, those are massive good movies. I mean, there's a whole bunch of his that are good, and like the old cavalry ones, I really like those. So it's sort of like I would have to answer according to my mood.
So would it be like your favorite in a certain category, like your favorite John Wayne World War II movie?
Yeah, I mean, if you divided it up into chunks, I think it's possible to come up with favorite John Wayne movies. As far as quotes and stuff, he's got a bunch, but I don't know. I guess it depends because he's got ones from just being John Wayne, the actor, and being him, and then he's got one quotes from movies.
That's true. I didn't even think about that. All the quotes from the actual movies.
But if I had to pick one overall, Green Brace.
Great movie.
Yeah,
Great movie. I haven't
great
seen
choice.
that movie in some in quite a while. So, did any of you guys hear what I believe was the Second Amendment Foundation, the Firearms Policy Coalition, did in Colorado?
I have not seen that.
So you know how one of the I guess the anti-gun arguments is that our founding fathers never intended, like it was only for muskets, like they didn't intend for high capacity magazines and semi-automatic firearms and stuff like that. Those kind of arguments that come out of those guys. So these guys put together a brief for, I believe, the Colorado. I'm not sure if it was the Senate or the Supreme Court or the Senate. I can't remember. But I think it might have been the Supreme Court. But basically documenting actual history and cases where like those actually did exist before Colorado even became a state. So the people who wrote Colorado's Constitution knew what they were talking about because there was high capacity firearms that held more than 15 rounds. And if people aren't aware, Colorado has a 15 round magazine capacity limit law there. But they put together documented cases, saying and stating, showing actual history and facts that the people who made Colorado's Constitution knew that there was high capacity firearms available and they were in circulation and widely used, and semi-automatic firearms, and they knew about these things, and that they were smart people and they knew what they were doing. And I was just really impressed that they could put together an articulable statement like that and based on facts to counter that anti-gun their arguing points about how they didn't intend for this and they didn't know about this new technology and stuff, and how a lot of even modern day firearms are based on those same exact firearms that existed over 100 years ago.
Go Alan Gottlieb. Love that guy.
And yeah, Brandon Combs of the Firearms Policy Coalition, I think, is the one who I think he spearheaded that, and I think the Second Amendment Foundation was involved too. And there's probably some other people I'm leaving out of that. I'm sure. I don't think it was just necessarily one group. I think it was a conglomerate of groups working together. But there's a court case in the Supreme Court, Sternberg versus Colorado right now. So they put together a brief to fight this anti-gun view or this anti-gun law in Colorado. That that argument that they didn't intend for this, or they didn't know that this was going to happen, or this technology was going to come along. So it was pretty impressive. So I'll post a link out there so other people can read that. Let's see here. Here we
So
go.
yesterday was also the anniversary of the death of Forsyth, a guy from England, I think, who created I guess you'd call it the percussion cap, even though it was a big contraption that eventually became the percussion cap. That was, what year do you think the percussion cap was invented? Without looking.
1838.
1821.
Woods is closer without going over. Let's see if the gun channel's chatting has a better answer. What year the percussion cap? Without cheating. Without cheating. So why do you pick 18? What'd you say? 30 something, Dead Horse?
I said 1838 just because I know that the 22 long rifle or the 22 rimfire came around in 1851. So I figured it had to have been before that. I just didn't know how long before that. So I just threw out a random number.
And then were you just doing some kind of strategy there, or why'd you pick the 20 something?
I picked 1821 because I was trying to do Price's Right rolls, and I just minus some number lower. I didn't really have a great reason for picking 1821.
Turns out it was 1805. So it was quite a while ago.
Oh, wow.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
I was off by 33 years.
That was in England, so it's probably in stupid metric. So it wasn't even explainable to other humans yet for a while until they explained it in regular English. And then it was a big contraption. It eventually became the percussion cap. And I'm not saying I'm some historian, but I'm just going to say that was not clear. Sometimes there's you can do research and it's here's the guy that invented this, and here's the date that he invented it, and here's the date that he came up with the idea, and it's done deal. No one disputes it. This isn't one of those things. So maybe I shouldn't even have brought it up. So some guy in Europe came up with the percussion cap. John's asking what 1805 is in metric. It's a good question. Do they even have metric time calendar? 10 days in the week? 5 weeks in a month? 10 months in a year? I think that's how it works in metric.
Probably. I mean, if everything's probably based on the 10 system, right?
And then instead of being
the
the names aren't named after the Greek gods or whatever. They're named after communist heroes of the state. So you have different names for the days.
Do they still have 7 days, or we just have 5?
Yeah, exactly. 5 days, 5 weeks, and then 10 months in a year.
Because it's got to go into 10 really nicely.
Yeah, it's got to be easy to count.
And I've actually seen a lot of posts lately, especially from some larger channels and stuff about percussion pistols, and letting people know that, hey, these aren't considered firearms, that you can have them delivered to your house, and you buy them right out of the mail, and you load them yourself, and explaining that, and letting the younger generation know that's a thing, right? So I can easily see maybe even growing up in today's day and age of just mostly semi-auto pistols and stuff like that, not even knowing that they're regulated differently, that they don't even consider a black powder pistol or percussion cap pistol to be a firearm anymore, right? And when did that go into effect in '68 with the GCA G or with the NFA? I don't know. When did they determine that a black powder pistol is not a firearm?
All right. So they never, that isn't the thing that happened. No one ever sat down and said, this is no longer a fire, or this is no longer a firearm.
Okay.
Simply, there are definitions that do not include them. Does that make sense? So there are definitions of a rocket launcher, and they don't include a percussion cap gun, right? There are definitions of every other thing that we know about. I don't have to go through them all, but none of them include that. So the same way that a firearm, you know, a 27-inch length with a, I don't even think they have to have an 18-inch barrel, or maybe they do have to have an 18-inch barrel, you know, like those firearms, those 12-gauge firearms that exist. They exist because they are not defined. They comply with the law by not falling into any definitions that have restrictions. That's sort of how they exist. So I think it would be a combination of 34, you know, which was the first federal level laws that basically would have somehow in the definitions probably talked about, well, I think what happened in 34 is they said stuff like all short rifles are no good, or all short shotguns are no good. And then people started to ask questions like, well, what about this gun that, you know, isn't really a gun, or this gun that was made before so-and-so time? And I think there was some, I don't know what to call them, like refinements to the definitions, perhaps, is that the way to call it? Like, you know, the definitions became more precise over time or something. And maybe that's when, but I'm not sure exactly. I don't think in 68 really had anything to do with anything. I think it was like 38 or something, somewhere in the 30s that serial numbers started. So it might have been then. You know, if like, and again, it would have been sort of like, well, we're going to require that these guns have serial numbers, and that creates a subset of guns that were not included. And so even though the law didn't say these guns are not included, it just didn't include those guns, which makes them not included, which is sort of like putting them all in a group that says they're not included. And I think that's what we consider all the pre-1898. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Yep.
But that'd be a good question for, I don't know who, because I don't know if there are people at ATF that have that specific task. They may all have to deal with it, but I don't know how often each individual officer or agent, I guess, has to go in and deal with why 1898 is that date and what piece of paper or what pieces of paper, you know, affect that, like make that law.
Or why they enacted that, like in the first place, what brought that around in the first place, to what started that to even bring that up as a thing, like, oh, before 1898, you know, these aren't considered firearms anymore.
Let's see what the internet says.
I do see black powder making a comeback, though. I've just seen a lot more people posting about it, a lot more people shooting them. And I know I got back into it. I don't think I had the patience when I was younger, not only to shoot them, but to clean them. And but, you know, I bought a black powder rifle last year, and I've definitely been getting back into it with my kids, and it's nice.
Well, this says, according to the internet, which is never incorrect, so it's written right here on the internet. Under the United States Gun Control Act of 1968, any cartridge firearm made in or before 1898 is classified as an antique and is generally outside of federal jurisdiction, as administered by and enforced by the BATFE. The only exceptions to the federal exemption are antique machine guns, such as the Maxim and the Potato Digger, and shotguns firing shotgun shells that are classified as short barreled per the 68. What? Well, short barreled per the 1934 is what that should say. Namely, cartridge rifles with a barrel less than blah blah blah. So again, NFA items aren't, you know, considered not guns necessarily. But this starts the whole thing off with cartridge firearms made on and before. So this says the following excerpt is from the portion of the Gun Control Act of 68, which modified Title 18 U.S. Code, which is 1934's NFA, and it exempted pre-1899 firearms from the federal firearms license paperwork administered by the ATF. So that would have been a 1968 what would you call it, like edit to the 1938, whatever it's called, national, the Federal Firearms Act, which was the 4 years after the National Firearms Act. The Federal Firearms Act created FFLs, and that, I guess, has a section that says, or that was amended in '68, that now says, any firearm, including a firearm with a matchlock, flintlock, percussion cap, or similar type ignition, manufactured on or before 1898, and any replica of any firearm just described, is not designated or redesigned. Oh, wait. And if such replica is not designed or redesigned to use rimfire, conventional centerfire fixed ammunition in the United States, and which is not readily available, what do you call it? I don't know how this is supposed to be read. Any firearm manufactured in or before, and any replica I guess they're not. There is no conclusion to that. That is just the definition, I guess. So, what is an antique? Is any firearm with a matchlock, flintlock, percussion, or similar, manufactured before 1898. Any replica, and I guess any replica that shoots. I think this is saying any replica of a firearm designed or described in that paragraph. If the such replica is not designed or redesigned for use in rimfire. Okay, so it can't be rimfire or conventional centerfire.
And still enjoy that class. So as soon as you drop in one of those conversion cylinders, that lets you shoot.
No, it says designed, though. It says designed. So I don't know if by adding an additional feature to it that then takes it out of its designed, use, then you're not, that's not affecting it, I don't think. But whatever. So it basically says 1968 is what controlled it, and it did it by editing a 1938 federal law.
The Federal Firearms Act, that's not one that we hear talked about. We always hear bring up the NFA and the GCA, but I never hear about the Federal Firearms Act very much.
Yep, that's the one that created the FFLs and serial numbers, if I remember right. It was basically and that's one of those things that we need to do research or find somebody who's done research and read about it. But I think it was a challenge to the NFA, and it was a way to solidify the NFA so that it could quit being challenged or save it from potentially being challenged.
So would that be something we'd have to break down before attacking the NFA?
No.
Did you put in place as like a barrier?
No, it's a support, that holds up the NFA. Once the NFA, I guess you could say you could take it down, but taking down, but I don't think, maybe I'm wrong. I don't think if you got rid of that somehow the NFA falls apart. I think that it's there to make the NFA stand up, but the NFA is big, but sits there by itself. Let's see. So it must be 121 years old to be an antique. I don't think that any other category of physical possession requires that age to be required an antique. Yeah, but that's just because of federal definition of those guns, I guess. Like here in Arizona, I think it just has to be 25 years old and it's an antique for a car. So
that's how it is here.
A floating or whatever date, it's always 25 years ago, so it's always a different year.
Does that mean that when we're 25 years old, we're considered an antique after that?
Mm-hmm. Costs more.
Yeah.
Harder to find parts for. All right, well, it ain't getting any cooler, which it should be, but it ain't. And nobody's saying anything, really. So we're chatting, but we're not getting a conversation going. So I'm going to say thanks for everybody for showing up. This is the last show. Good run.